Sometimes you hear a story that sounds so far-fetched that you can't help but laugh. Such is the case of some urban legend. But sometimes these urban legends, impossible as they may seem, have a grain of truth on them. Today, we'll check some of these true stories. Back in 2003, an urban legend started to circulate in some areas of Baton Rouge, United States.
If you don't lock your doors at night, the serial snuggler will definitely get you.
We're all familiar with scary creatures that are supposed to jump out at night. So when the story of the serial snuggler was first passed down from person to person in the local area, the snuggler became just that at first. A shadowy figure like the boogeyman. Something to scare college students into falling asleep with locked doors. But back in March of the same year, people of the area, particularly women, reported strange sensations of being watched at night.
I couldn't sleep well at all. Are you guys perhaps playing a prank on me?
Some reported their food were missing or their things out of place. This caused strange stories to be passed down from campus to campus. At first, people thought that it might be a joke or initiation. But we all know what they say in crime stories. It's impossible, until it isn't.
Police emergency 679.
Yeah, hi, we just had a man break into our house.
A what?
A man.
Is he still there?
No, he finally left. He crawled in through a window.
Before we get to the why and how, let's introduce a guy named Steve. Steve was well liked by students, teachers, and even his school's administrator. In fact, Steve was on track to become a baseball legend, having driven the winning run of his high school's state championship for baseball. But sadly, not all dreams are easily met. When Steve went to college, his dreams were shattered. A sure shoo-in for the baseball team, Steve was surprised when he didn't make the cut. He sank into depression and turned to alcohol and medication. The next few months transformed a well-rounded person into what we now know as the serial snuggler. But what exactly did Steve do? This is the part that baffled everyone, including his victims and the local law enforcement. According to one victim, she woke up in the middle of the night to feel someone hugging her. Thinking it was a joke from her friends, she asked what was going on. When the person hugging her replied that his name was Steve, the victim was shocked and scared for her life.
What have you done to it?
She didn't know a Steve and might have thought of getting raped or killed. Stranger still is when she told Steve to let go of her and leave, Steve easily complied without a fuss. This wasn't the only time Steve did this to women though. According to reports, he had about a dozen victims. Steve would go into unlocked rooms, cuddle women in their sleep, then leave. Sometimes he'd even fold the laundry of the victims before leaving. And sometimes, he'd drink and eat their food and go. Friends and family of Steve couldn't believe that he was capable of such strange acts, and attributed it to alcohol. He was sentenced to 200 hours of community service, and swore to leave his serial snuggling life behind for good. You might have heard of this next story of ours, which is none other than the Russian sleep experiment. But for those in the dark, the story briefly goes like this. In the Soviet era of Russia, 5 criminals were taken to a secret lab. As their punishment, they were subjected to sleep experiments. The prisoners were placed in an airtight chamber and given experimental gas that they inhaled for days. This gas would prevent them from falling asleep for weeks. You can probably guess what happened next to the poor prisoners. After all, humans can't survive while staying awake. In the story, the criminals turned violent and crazy, leading them to behave like zombies and kill each other. While this experiment was proven to be nothing but a hoax, it does have a grain of truth to it though. And no, it doesn't even involve the Russians. In the 1980s, a man named Silvano realized he was drenched in sweat while he was on a cruise ship. He looked at the mirror and immediately knew he was going to die. But to understand how Silvano knew, let's go back to the 18th century, towards Silvano's great relative, a Venetian doctor who couldn't fall asleep. For most people, sleep comes easy, especially when they're tired. But for some, they have problems falling or staying asleep. This is known as insomnia, as you probably know, but Silvano's family is on the extreme side. Because once they get this insomnia, they can never go to sleep for months, leading them to die.
What happened to you? Get up!
Silvano's family has this rare condition called fatal familial insomnia. In the human population, 1 or 2 out of 1 million people get it. Right now, as you're watching this video, about 70 families have this. Most families who have it are usually quiet about it to maintain their privacy. Silvano's condition was passed down to him from his relative dating back in the 18th century. It starts with sweating, which then leads to other symptoms. Since they can't sleep from the moment they discover that they have this, they'll just move like they're dreaming for days, much like zombies, leading to the month they die. Until now, there's no known cure for this condition. Scientists want to create a medicine, but the families involved are scared to participate. After all, in order for them to drink the experimental medicine and test it, they need to know first who in their family will someday get the rare insomnia, as this condition only emerges when a person hits their middle age. And knowing at an early age that they will have the condition someday will make them scared for their life. It's nothing like the Russian sleep experiment at all, but they do suffer the same fate of dying. This next urban legend usually happens around the hospital, particularly to medical students. One variation of this story tells of a group of students who want to play a prank on one of their friends. The prank begins with one of the students getting a part of a cadaver they used for dissection. In the urban legends, it's usually a foot of a dead person. The students would then place the foot inside the room of one of their friends. And hiding out of sight, they'd wait for this friend to return to the room and get scared to death. But the prank would backfire in ways they can't imagine. While hiding in the corner waiting, their friend would arrive, enter the room, and lock her door. And then upon seeing the cadaver's foot, she would scream, making the pranksters laugh. But upon trying to get inside their friend's door to reveal their cruel joke, they'd find the door locked. But their friend would just continue screaming and screaming. This would cause them to break open the door to make her stop. But what they'd see would only scare them. Sitting in the bed is their friend, eyes glazed and unfocused, eating the cadaver's foot. Sounds impossible, right? Like the Russian sleep experiment, this is just an urban legend. But what if I tell you that there's this thing called formaldehyde hunger? This has long been the topic of medical students and some health professionals. That working with formaldehyde can sometimes trigger hunger. Formaldehyde can be used for a lot of things, even in our own homes. It's seen in the production of plywoods, automobile parts, and even explosives. But when dissolved in water, you can turn it into formalin. Formalin is then used for morgues, as a preservative for antiseptics, and in medical labs. That's why they're used for dead bodies to prevent decomposition. Some medical students say they get hungry while they're dissecting dead people. According to them, the presence of formaldehyde is the trigger. Imagine looking at a dismembered arm and salivating. Maybe that's where the urban legend came from. Either way, acting on the thought is going to be different. By then, it's not just going to be an urban legend. If you like these types of videos, please feel free to subscribe. We plan to dish out stories every week or every other week. You can also suggest some topics that you like, and we'll see if we can make them.